Hello, welcome to VID-O-RAMA, where we remember the VHS releases of the past in graphic detail. My name's Adwan Jones. I'm an artist, and each month on this channel I paint a tribute to a movie that we rented on video back in the day. I'd like to show you the painting process, and I'd like to share some useless movie trivia with you. It's October, so what better time to paint a tribute to Halloween? That classic directed and scored by John Carpenter, starring Donald Pleasance and Jamie Lee Curtis, released in 1978. As you can see, I've sketched out a design for painting. This independent slasher was a big deal when it was released in 1978, and it's still considered one of the greats. Created on a relatively small budget, it very quickly became one of the biggest independent movies of all time. But anyway, enough of all this, let's paint a tribute to Halloween. The colours I'm using today are titanium white, Mars black, cadmium orange and cobalt blue. Detail is then added with permanent marker pens. I want this one to feel autumnal, so the orange colour was a given. It also harks back to the Halloween 3 tribute I painted 2 years back. As for the second colour, I thought blue, to reflect nighttime. Halloween. Normally on these videos I give the plot of the film, but do I really need to give it? I better. You never know. On Halloween 1963, in the town of Haddonfield, a 6-year-old boy called Michael Myers murders his teenage sister and is committed at the Smiths Grove Sanitarium. But in 1978 he escapes and makes his way back to Haddonfield with his psychiatrist Dr. Sam Loomis in pursuit. Having arrived back at the town, Michael steals a Halloween mask from a hardware store and starts to stalk a high school student called Laurie Strode. But while Loomis tries to convince the sheriff that Michael is back, that he's evil and he will kill anyone that gets in his way, Laurie and her friend Annie prepare to babysit that evening. Michael starts to pick off babysitters, their friends and boyfriends one by one before turning his full attention towards Laurie. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't know what to tell you. It's revered by both horror fans and fans of cinema. Although it wasn't the first slasher movie, and it wasn't even the first holiday-themed, calendar-based slasher movie, because before this one we had Silent Night, Bloody Night in 1972, and Bob Clark's Black Christmas, which was released in 1974. Black Christmas has actually been cited as being an influence on Halloween, actually. But Halloween was the first to make it big, and certainly paved the way for the other movies. It's safe to say that we wouldn't have such movies as Friday the 13th, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Christmas Evil, New Year's Evil, and My Bloody Valentine if it wasn't for this movie. So because of its high status, there isn't a whole lot that hasn't already been discussed or scrutinised by scholars and critics over the years. But it all started when an independent film producer and distributor, Irwin Yablans, the man responsible for such movies as Tourist Trap, Hell Night, Blood Beach, Parasite, and Prison, that's a good one. He wanted to produce a horror movie about a killer stalking babysitters, and having seen John Carpenter's work on Assault on Precinct 13, he felt that Carpenter would be perfect for the job. And so he and the film producer and financier Mustaf Akkad approached Carpenter, who agreed to do the movie for $30,000, but only if he had full creative control and his name above the title. And for that he would write, direct and score the movie. So, with that settled, Carpenter, along with his then girlfriend Debra Hill, started drafting a story called The Babysitter Murders. Debra Hill had worked as a babysitter during her teens in Haddonfield, New Jersey, and she decided to set the story in a fictional town of Haddonfield, Illinois. Yablans then suggested that the movie should take place on Halloween night, and that they should simply call the movie Halloween. Carpenter explored the haunted house folklore that seems to exist in most small towns, along with the notion of someone being truly evil, basing it on his own experience, remembering a time that he visited a psychiatric institution in Kentucky during his college days. He apparently saw a boy with a blank schizophrenic stare, and that stayed with him. As for the film's tone, he wanted the movie to play like a haunted house at a fair, things constantly jumping out to scare you. I've just finished painting one of the movie Scream Queens, the lovely PJ Soles. Even before Halloween, she had already starred in a few horror movies. She was in Bloodbath, 1975, The Possessed, which was a TV movie released in 1977, but more importantly, she was Norma in Carrie. After Halloween, she appeared in many other movies, some of them horror. She was in Uncle Sam, released in 1996, and The Devil's Rejects in 2005. And she would return to the Halloween franchise in 2018, in Halloween 2018, as the voice of Allison's teacher. Carpenter wanted PJ Soles for this movie, having seen her in Carrie, and he wrote the part of Linda especially for her. During production, she was dating Dennis Quaid, and she would marry him the same year. They had hoped to get him for this movie, but he had other work commitments. The film is full of references to family, friends and influences. Apparently Laurie Strode was named after one of Carpenter's old girlfriends, and Michael Myers was named after the producer of Assault on Precinct 13. Alfred Hitchcock is a major influence on this film, not only in style but also in character names. Tommy Doyle was the name of a detective in Hitchcock's Rear Window, and Loomis was a character in Psycho. Of course, the biggest Hitchcock nod is the casting of Jamie Lee Curtis. It's no secret that her mother was Janet Leigh, who played Marion Crane in Psycho. But perhaps a little bit more obscure, Peter Griffith, who briefly played Laurie's father at the beginning of the movie, he was once married to Tippi Hedren. Always fun to work on Michael Myers, or the Shape as he was referred to in the credits. How the Shape acquired his now iconic look is interesting. Well, I think so. They wanted the clothes he wore to be muted so that you would only notice the face, which the script described as a blank face mask. Carpenter envisioned it being similar to the mask that featured in the 1960 French film Les Yeux Sans Visage, Eyes Without a Face. But as for the iconic mask, and it is iconic, it first started with Don Post Studios, a studio formed by Don Post, the Sorry about that. The studio was formed by Don Post, the man responsible for the first ever over-the-head latex mask back in 1938. He would later develop the wearable lightweight latex masks during the 1950s. They produced masks for movies and television and produced many licensed masks, including the iconic Tor Johnson mask. But in 1975, the studio acquired the rights to produce a range of Star Trek masks. The studio just wanted to release masks based on the creatures from the show, such as the Gorn, the Salt Vampire and the Mugato, but part of their licensing agreement with Paramount stipulated that Spock and Kirk would also need to be included in the lineup, and so, using Nimoy and Shatner's life masks from the show, they reluctantly produced them, and as they feared, the Kirk mask didn't sell. But a few years later, Tommy Lee Wallace, who was both co-editor and production designer on Halloween, and would eventually go on to direct Halloween 3, was tasked with finding a mask for the movie, and so he went to Burt Wheeler's Magic Shop on Hollywood Boulevard and bought 4 masks from the store. The masks were of Richard Nixon, Mr. Spock, Captain Kirk, and Emmett Kelly, the Weary Willy hobo clown. They almost went with the Emmett Kelly mask, and they even altered it, adding frizzy red hair. And this idea does make sense when you think about it, because Michael was dressed as a clown when he killed his sister. But they instead went with the Kirk mask. They pulled off the eyebrows, the sideburns, and front half of his hair, cut the eye holes, making them bigger, spray painted it white, and the rest is history. And this, of course, is the definitive Scream Queen, Jamie Lee Curtis, in what was her movie debut. However, she wasn't Carpenter's first choice. He actually wanted Anne Lockhart for the role, but she had other commitments, and so it was instead offered to Jamie Lee Curtis. Debra Hill admitted that she thought Curtis' casting was great, not only for talent, but also as PR for the movie. Curtis would subsequently appear in several other horror films before becoming an established Hollywood movie star. She was in Prom Night and Terror Train, released in 1980, and then on Carpenter's The Fog. And of course there were the Halloween sequels. Despite being a Scream Queen, I didn't want to portray her screaming in this painting. There is a lot more to this character. She was a fighter. I had to include the old Myers house in this painting. They found this old abandoned house in Meridian, California, and having completed all the shots, the cast and crew then cleaned it up. They wallpapered, painted and furnished it to transform it into a realistic looking home for the scene set in 1963. The house is still standing, although not in the original spot. In 1987 they were going to demolish the house, but thankfully it was saved and relocated to the east side of Meridian, and is currently a chiropractor's office. Now then, paintbrushes. I use cheap paintbrushes because reasons. And after a time, the bristles will start to fray. But rather than throwing them away, I keep them to one side because they're very useful for painting hedges. An already established actor was on the film, and that was of course Donald Pleasance, playing one of my favourite characters, Dr. Sam Loomis. Pleasance was a great actor. He was in many films. He was in The Great Escape, and he played Blofeld in You Only Live Twice. He was also in one of my favourite Columbo episodes, Any Old Port in a Storm. He was no stranger to horror. He was in Circus of Horror, Monster Club, Deathline, The Mutations, and later John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. And he returned as Loomis in Halloween 2, 4, 5 and 6. He joked that he would stop playing Loomis after the 22nd movie. I mentioned at the start of this video that I wanted this painting to feel autumnal, and so I included some dead leaves falling. Actually, on the subject of leaves, this is one of the things that amuses me about movies. I mentioned in my tribute to Madman last year that the movie was filmed in the autumn, and so they had to paint the leaves green to make it seem like summer. Well, for Halloween they had the problem only in reverse. Halloween was filmed in the spring, so they had to provide their own dead leaves to make it look like October. They had artificial leaves that they would litter the streets with, drop them in front of the camera and so on, and then once the shot was done, they would rake them up again, put them in a bag and reuse them on the next location. If you really look, you will notice that Haddonfield is surprisingly green for late October, but credit to them, it still feels like autumn in that film. But to go back to Donald Pleasance, if I may, Pleasance wasn't Carpenter's first choice for the role of Loomis. He actually wanted Peter Cushing for the role, but as Cushing had starred in Star Wars the previous year, his agent rejected the low salary they offered. It was then offered to Christopher Lee, who also turned it down, but years later Lee would confess to Carpenter and Hill that turning down the role of Loomis was one of the biggest mistakes of his career. It was Yablans that suggested Pleasance, who accepted the part purely because one of his 6 daughters was a guitarist and she'd loved Carpenter's score on Assault on Precinct 13. I'm glad he did though. Despite what many think, Halloween features very little blood, and I had to remind myself of this factor when bloodying up this knife. I'm holding back somewhat. I have got a habit of going overboard. A John Carpenter movie has been long overdue for this channel. Truth be told, I'm not entirely sure why it's taken me so long to get to him, seeing as I hold this film, The Thing, The Fog and They Live in such high regard. Let me know which Carpenter movies you like in the comments, and which ones you'd like to see feature in future videos. I wanted to include the pumpkin somewhere, as it's one of the earliest memories I have of this film. I remember being 6 or 7 and my grandmother was babysitting. I was in bed, I was supposed to be asleep, and I heard this strange song. I came downstairs and made the usual excuse that kids make about wanting a glass of water, and there on the screen was a shot of a jack-o'-lantern and that classic John Carpenter score playing. And that image, it etched itself onto my consciousness. I'm almost done now. Would you like another fact before I go? Okay, we are told that Tommy reads Laser Man, Neutron Man and Tarantula Man comics. These were of course made up for the film. But if you're quick and sad like me, you will spot issue 26 of Howard the Duck and issue 12 of Godzilla King of the Monsters. Right, the signature, and we can call this one done. Thank you for joining me today and keeping me company. As ever, I hope that was of interest to you and that you liked the finished painting. I'm so pleased to finally be able to add Halloween to the lineup. If you like the painting and you approve, please give this video a thumbs up or leave a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ringing that all-important bell. And if you'd like to support the channel further, we have a Patreon page, the VID-O-RAMA Video Club, where you can get monthly sketch cards, Patreon-only prints, stickers and badges, and there's also an Etsy store where you can get t-shirts and prints. All the links are in the description. thank you very much again for watching, and happy Halloween to you, and until next time, good night out there, whatever you are.